That was President Obama addressing a question about issues raised from a botched execution this week in Oklahoma. In his comments, the president was clear to reiterate that in his opinion, there are crimes so heinous they warrant capital punishment. But he noted that the application of said punishment needs revising. So just think about what we do not know about the process used to put people to death in America. We do not know where the drugs used to administer death come from. We do not know how those drugs have been tested. How can we say that their use is not cruel and unusual if we do not know how they work or what kind of pain they actually cause? Over 43 minutes Tuesday night, a guilty man who no doubt committed a heinous crime, writhed in pain in that Oklahoma prison. They lowered the shades 19 minutes into the execution, so we really do not know what happened as that man struggled for those remaining 24 minutes before he was pronounced dead. There's a lot we do not know. We don't even know if we're killing the right people. A brand new study by the National Academy of Sciences this week suggests that 4% of people awaiting execution are likely innocent. So think of it this way. Since 1977, 1,378 Americans have been executed in this country. If the study is accurate, as many as 55 innocent people may have been killed. Imagine that. 55 innocent lives taken by the states. Now, the botched execution in Oklahoma has reignited a national conversation about capital punishment, and the president has announced that he will have Attorney General Eric Holder review how the death penalty is applied. Our panel is back with me, and we're joined by Diane Russ-Tierney, Executive Director at the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Diane, thanks for joining us. I want to start with you and just sort of ask the question, have you felt a shift this week? Because we've certainly gone back to having more of a national conversation about the death penalty than I think we have in a long time. Do you see a shift in attitudes?
Absolutely. There's been an incredible shift in attitudes, starting with the fact that the President of the United States is now saying that the death penalty needs to be more closely examined. And he's speaking as someone who hasn't decided that the death penalty is under all circumstances inappropriate. And so I think we've seen an incredible shift in the public's attitude over the years. And these questions that you've been raising about the fact that innocent people can be executed, the fact that we don't even know how we're actually going about these executions, I think we've had an incredible shift. And I think, now we can really say that the death penalty's days are definitely numbered.
Kate, one of the things that came out this week is that this sort of cocktail of drugs that they use, because the EU won't sell them to the United States anymore, some states are running out, so now they're trying to try different variations, and they admittedly don't even know if what they're doing is working.
No, absolutely, and there's very little known about how these drugs work, what these drugs are, and I think that occurring in Oklahoma this week really shed light on this issue. I think a lot of people don't realize that we're basically testing this out on people, and we saw in very vivid detail what that means in reality this week.
Diane, what is that going to mean long term in terms of how we look at what the options are, I should say, for administering the death penalty?
Well, the first thing I would say is this. We're getting an up-close and personal look at how the death penalty actually works in practice. Oklahoma isn't the only state that's taking the position that they can execute people with secret drugs. The kind of hubris and arrogance, sort of the pedal to the metal, we're going to go forward with this execution no matter what, that is what's characteristic of the death penalty. So what I think is going to happen is that there's going to be a much more of a focus, as it should be, on how our government behaves. Because at the end of the day, the death penalty is about what role the government plays, what rights the government plays and has, and whether the government at the end of the day deserves to kill when it behaves in the way that it has in Oklahoma and other places, which is actually recklessly. When we execute people, regardless of being certain about whether they're innocent, as we saw in the case of Troy Davis, that's the government behaving recklessly. So we've seen reckless behavior, and so I think that's going to really shift the focus of the debate, and it's a place for people to really get engaged and ask these hard questions.
It's been interesting because a number of elected officials, certainly from states that do administer the death penalty, have said that they have not seen a shift. They have not changed their mind. And in fact, Governor Rick Perry from Texas was on Meet the Press this morning and talked about it. So let's take a listen.
Is it appropriate for a pause in our national discussion and application of the death penalty? The president talking about bias, uneven application, soul-searching questions that he'd like the country to take. Do you agree with that?
There may be appropriate for a pause in Oklahoma.
He went on, so Sophia, he went on to essentially say that in Texas, he feels they use one particular drug. We don't know what drug that is, but that he feels very comfortable with the procedures in Texas. I found it a little bit surprising that he wouldn't even at least acknowledge that maybe we should take a look at this.
Let me say this. I'm for the death penalty completely, but we should never shy away as a nation from checking ourselves, taking a look at if we're doing the right thing, if we're administering justice in appropriate ways. With regard to what happened in Oklahoma, while I agree that in uniform cases to be uniform, we want people that are administered to death penalty. By the way, I disagree that the government behaved recklessly. The jury makes a decision that the person is sentenced to death, and the government carries out that sentence.
Well, so but as they saw this man writhing in pain, and they decided to go ahead with it.
But I want to think about the young lady. I want to think about the victim who, if you guys know the story, Google it, check it out. Yeah. She was buried alive. He showed no mercy, raped, shot somebody's only daughter. So I want us to be balanced with these things.
Diane, go ahead.
We are being balanced. And I think the point is nobody's saying that people who do horrible things shouldn't be punished. What we are saying is that there are limits that our Constitution imposes and that morality and humanity imposes and that the rest of the world is looking at. And so, you know, we should never be thinking that if we question how our government behaves, we're somehow being disloyal to people who are harmed. That's absolutely not the case. You know, what I would also say is that, you know, this would not be the first time in Rick Perry's case where the facts are being ignored. The reality is that public support for the death penalty has declined markedly, particularly because of these issues of innocence. You know, Michael Steele was on MSNBC earlier talking about how he thought that what happened in Oklahoma was going to actually increase the amount of opposition and lower the support. So this issue really is moving through the American public, and we're going to see the end of it.
You know, Aisha, I want to get to one final point from Think Progress, something you may know a little bit about. One of the concerns I think a lot of people have, and this goes to sort of this broader issue about sentencing reform, but how disproportionately it's people of color who are on death row. And this sort of, and again, I think this goes to this idea of the application of some of these penalties. And again, in this one particular case in Oklahoma, what he did was horrible. That I'm not saying, but I do think it gives us a moment to take a step back and say, just question our humanity for a second and make sure that we're doing things in accordance to our values.
Question our humanity and certainly question our criminal justice system largely, right? Because exactly like you said, we know that there is a disproportionate impact of the way that our laws are applied, the miscarriages of justice that happen against people of color, particularly African-American males, but also, I'm putting a report out on this on Wednesday talking about the criminalization LGBT people and people who are living with HIV in this country, because they experience very similar parallel tracks to what we see with people of color, and most of those people are people of color. And so I think that for the president and for Attorney General Eric Holder to be looking at this as just another case along with drug sentencing of why we need to re-examine our criminal justice system and our penalties in a bigger, bolder way to get at those disparities. I think this is one of those opportunities for people to not be arrogant and turn a blind eye and to say, yeah, we should rethink this.
Really quickly, Kate.
The last thing I was going to say is I think the other thing that's changing people's minds is the realization that the system is not flawless. And now that we have better DNA testing and better scientific methods behind this, we're seeing that people are being exonerated. And I think that gives a lot of people pause.
All right, guys, we have to leave it there. Thank you, Diane.